Has your child said, I hate reading? Maybe they can read, they just don't want to. And it is so frustrating as a parent, right? Because you know that reading matters. But here's the part that a lot of parents don't realize. The gap between kids who read and kids who don't isn't small. It's massive. We're talking millions of words difference every single year. So in this video, I'm going to show you what that gap really means, why forcing reading doesn't work, and how you can flip the script using AI, choice, and a few simple strategies to actually make your child want to read. If you've ever sat there thinking, oh my God, why is this such a battle? You are not alone. I hear this from parents all the time, and here's the truth. Kids don't hate reading. They hate how reading feels to them. So instead of pushing harder, we're going to change that experience. In this video, I'm going to share the research that explains why reading matters so much, a simple mindset shift from reading to be good to reading to play, win, and connect. And then I'm going to show you a live demo showing how your child can create their own illustrated book using AI that they can read, and 10 other practical ways to motivate them even if they are the most reluctant reader. So let's start with what's really at stake here. There's something called the Matthew effect. It basically means that the kids who read more get better faster, and the kids who don't, they fall further behind. Here's what that looks like in real life. A child who reads 20 minutes a day sees 2 million words a year, and a child who reads 5 minutes a day sees about 282,000 words. And a child who reads 1 minute a day, as little as 8,000 words. Now, I want you to let that sink in, because that is not a small gap. That is a completely different world. And here's the kicker. Kids don't learn most vocabulary from lessons. They catch words accidentally just by seeing them in context. So a child who reads more is quietly building a vocabulary advantage every single day. And a lot of parents think, they're at school, isn't that enough? Not really. Because a lot of the school at reading it's functional, it's simplified, it's repetitive, but the real growth, it actually comes from stories, curiosity, and choice. In fact, children's books often contain more rare vocabulary than TV shows and everyday conversation. So if a child only reads what's required, their vocabulary growth can actually stall. Now here's where everything changes. We stop saying, read because you should, or read to be a good student. And instead we start saying, let's read to play. Let's read to win. Let's read to connect. Because that's what actually is going to motivate kids. And here's one rule I always give parents. Give choices, but not the choice to skip reading. Instead of, do you want to read? Try. Do you want to read a graphic novel, build something with instructions, or create your own book today? Now they feel in control. So I'm going to show you something really powerful. What if your child didn't just read books, but actually created their own? Using Gemini, you can have your child come up with a story idea, ask Gemini to generate the story. It will also create illustrations, and then it turns it into a real book that they can read. What's cool about this is once they read it, sometimes they're like, oh, I don't like how this part turned out. And they can change it, and now they're rereading it, right? But with those changes to see where those changes happened. So imagine that now your child is reading more because they want to see what they created. And here's why this works so well. Ownership changes everything. It's no longer, oh, I have to read this. It becomes, I made this. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to Gemini, and you're going to go to the gem called Storybook. And the way that you can do that, if you click on gems, you'll see these pre-made gems by Gemini. But so that you can find it easier, I'm going to put it in the link below so that you can just grab it. So I'm going to click on now my Storybook link, and I'm going to have the story be created by the child. I'm going to ask them, what would you like to create a book about? The student may say that they would like to create a book about a magic meatball. So I'm going to put here, write a book about a magic meatball. I always like to go with the story of three, and I always will guide the student when they're creating the book. So a book always has to have a main character. In a fiction book, it doesn't have to be a real person. But in this particular book, we're taking a look at, okay, who's the main character? It's the meatball. He has superpowers. He can jump off people's plates and go back into the pot. And then we want to make sure that we have the magic of three inside of this book. So we're going to have a problem. We know what the problem is already. He doesn't want to be eaten. We have three solutions that don't work. And so I make the students tell me what are the three solutions that didn't work, because that makes the story more interesting at the end. And we want the kids creating books that are going to be interesting. So he sees the meatballs, he remembers, and sees them disappearing as well. And then decides to jump even further this time onto the stove. All right, now I'm going to click here to submit, and it's going to start creating like pictures that are going to go along with this particular story. We can see here it's writing the first draft. It's finalizing the illustrations. Now, I can also tell it to write a book at a certain grade level. If this is for a first grade student, if this is somebody who is still at the decodable stage in phonics, like in first grade or kindergarten, I can have it write a book at second grade, third grade, fourth grade level, all the way on up to whatever level I want it to be written at. I can also change the style of the pictures. I didn't give it any specific style here, but I could start like introducing my child to different types of illustrations that people use when they are creating books. And we could have talks about that and which style would be best for this particular book. Let's see, we've got Marlowe's Great Escape. I'm going to go into full screen here. Now, this can also be read, but I haven't been very impressed with the listen button so much, so I don't really tell the kids about that button there. But here we go. Once upon a time, there was a magic meatball named Marlowe. He lived in the most wonderful place in the world, a giant silver pot filled with warm, bubbly red sauce. To Marlowe, the pot was a cozy spa where he could float all day long. Imagine. Marlowe wasn't alone in the sauce. He spent his days rolling and splashing with his best friend, Barnaby. They played hide and seek behind the chunks of onion and practiced their best somersaults around the bay leaves. Suddenly, the lid was lifted with a loud clink. A giant named Zest reached into the pot with a silver ladle. She began serving the meatballs onto plates for the family dinner. Below her stood Wilder, a 7-year-old giant who looked very hungry. Now Marlowe landed on Wilder's plate and watched in horror as the giant raised a fork, and with one chomp, their friend Glaze was gone. The giant monster is eating us, Marlowe realized with a shiver. He knew he had to get out of there fast. When Zest turned her back to grab a napkin, Marlowe took a giant leap. He splashed back into the safety of the warm red sauce in the pot. But Zest heard the plop and saw the ripples. She reached in and scooped him right back up. "You are a bouncy one," Zest laughed. This time, she placed Marlowe on a new plate in front of a bearded giant named Bram. Bram was already holding his fork and knife, looking down at Marlowe as if he were a delicious prize. Sometimes you do get a page where there's no image. It really isn't that big of a deal. As Bram lowered his fork to take a bite, Marlowe didn't wait a second longer. He tucked his edges in, rolled to the edge of the plate, and bolted into the air. He landed with a soft thud on the flat silver surface of the stove. Zest shook her head and picked Marlowe up with a wide spatula. She placed him on the tray of the smallest giant, a baby named Boone. "Now this should keep you still," she said, reaching for a sharp metal knife to cut Marlowe into tiny pieces. Marlowe couldn't stay silent a moment longer. As the knife came closer, he stood as tall as he could. "Please don't eat me," he screamed at the top of his lungs. Wilder's fork hit the floor with a clang, and his eyes grew as round as dinner plates. The giants were so terrified of the talking food that they scrambled into the living room to hide. Marlowe didn't waste any time. He whistled for Barnaby and his other friends, and together they rolled across the floor and out the doggy door to safety. Now, sometimes I found that sometimes the kids are like, "Could we change this part to be like this?" And I'll be like, "Sure." Or they'll take a look at the pictures and be like, "Can you use a different style?" I could say, I'm going to exit out of here for a second, come on over here and say that I would like to create this illustrations to be, let's say, crayon style. Here we go. Now it's crayon style. I like it. I like too, it's actually keeping some good consistency with the character here as well. Love it. We even changed the story a little bit too with the crayon style. Now, I worked with a student. She absolutely hated reading, avoided it, fought it every single time. But then we did something different. And for the first time, when it came to reading a book, I saw her smile. Having her create her own story was something that she loved. Within a week, she was reading the own story, editing it, asking it to make another one. Nothing else changed, just the experience of reading. Now, depending on your child's age, I'm going to give you 3 ways to explain reading so they can understand it. If we explain the Matthew effect to your kid, they're going to look at you like, huh? What? But if I really explain it in a special way for them, depending on their age, it makes a difference. So with younger kids, we can say, "Did you know that every book is like unlocking a secret code in your brain?" You end up knowing words that other kids don't. You understand more, and then you can explain things a lot better. Now, for tweens and teens, you can use this like video game thing, right? You can say, "Reading is like gaining XP. School is your main quest, but reading at home, those are like your side quests, right? And side quests are where the real power comes from." Now, if I've got a teen, you're going to love this one. You can tell them, "Did you know that the more words that you know, the harder you are to control?" Reading builds this instant BS detector in your brain. This one usually lands. Now, I'm going to share with you 10 ways to motivate your child to read more. The first one is, let's create a great book using AI, which I just showed you. Another is doing a book versus a movie challenge. So with this, you can have them either watch the movie first or read the book first, and then decide which do they like better, have them watch the opposite. Some people like watching the movie first and then reading the book because it gives them that background knowledge. And this is really helpful for struggling readers. Or they can go about it the other way. They can read the book first and then watch the movie and then see which one they prefer. Connect reading to something that they love. So if they are totally into gymnastics or they're into Minecraft, find books that relate to that. I hear so many parents for number 4. It's almost like this is like a swear word in a lot of homes. Graphic novels. These count. In fact, sometimes the vocabulary is even larger than it is when I am reading other books. The beautiful thing is, it says to their brain when it has all of the images that are there to help tell the story, they're having to actually use a lot more mental thinking because the whole idea doesn't come just from the words. They're having to use more inferencing skills to put together the meaning from the words and then what's happening on that page to be able to get their comprehension. This is huge. This is a skill we want kids to be able to have, right? We want our kids to be thinkers. We want them to be able to communicate well. We want them to look at lots of different clues to be able to figure things out. We want them to grow into thinkers. And graphic novels help do that. Another one is do a cliffhanger read aloud. So you can read stories to your kid at night. This is a really great bonding time. But as soon as you get to a cliffhanger, close the book and tell them they can't find out until tomorrow about what's going to happen. You take that book, you give them their kiss goodnight, and you put that book right by their bed. Some of these kids, they're going to peek. Oh, yeah. And now you've created almost this backwards, like they're going to read. And then tomorrow when you come up to read, they're going to probably act like they didn't read it and they didn't know. But some of them, they are really going to be interested. They're going to want to know what's going to happen next. And you might have to tell them that they need to turn the lights off and go to bed. All right, this next one is a game changer. We all know that our kids love watching TV. Turn on the captions. So there was actually an entire country that did this. Norway. They didn't start school until the kids were like 6 or 7. Yet they ended up having the best readers across the world. And one of the reasons, because all the TV shows, they weren't in their native language. And so they had to turn on the captions in order to be able to understand what they were saying. And they had to read them. So they're really motivated to learn to read to know what was happening inside of these TV shows. So turn on the captions. Another is choose your own adventure book. So kids who don't like regular typical reading, they may get into a choose your own adventure book. There's lots of them on Amazon that you can check on out. Take a look at different reviews of different choose your own adventure books that exist out there. And this new way of reading means that I don't have to read a book from beginning to end because it's going to tell me to go to different pages and all of that great stuff. You can also here's another great tip. If they have to read something at school, let's say they're reading a nonfiction text at school and you're really struggling to get your kid to do their homework and read it, you can actually put it in AI and say, can you turn this into a choose your own adventure style and have them make a choice after every other paragraph. Makes it a little bit more interesting to have to read the information. They're holding on, they're retaining it, and that is the goal. Another approach is kind of like the build it model, right? Whether it's a recipe, like reading a recipe or reading Lego instructions, have them read and build. Read and build. So if make some food in the kitchen, I know lots of kids where you can get them with the recipes. Open up that recipe book, find some recipe books that would be really engaging for them and have them read those instructions while they're making what they make. Now the first step when reading instructions is to read all of the instructions first. I am the worst at this because I always go through, I read everything, and then there was something I was supposed to do that I didn't do because I didn't read all the instructions first. And so teaching them, hey, when we have a recipe, we're going to read it first, all the way through from beginning to end. Then we're going to take a look. Do we have the ingredients? Do we have the right amount of each ingredient? And do we have the resources and tools we need in order to make this? If not, then we got to go to the store. And the last one is give 3 to 4 reading choices daily. You know, when kids have a choice, it makes a difference between what they're going to read, if they're going to read, when they're going to read, right? It's not about giving a choice for reading. It's going to give them a choice of what they're going to be reading. And this makes a difference because choice then builds buy-in. We hate to be told to do things that we have to do, right? Even I do as an adult. And kids are just no different. Think about all the times we've asked them to do the chores and they never do that. It's like we turn reading into a chore, and that's the last thing we want to do. We want reading to be something that is a fun thing that we choose to do in our recreational time. Now, here's what I want you to remember. This isn't about raising a good reader. It's about raising a child who thinks clearly, expresses themselves confidently, and understands the world around them. And that starts with something simple, 20 minutes a day. Start small, but don't think small, because every page your child reads is building a future that you can't always see yet. So thanks for being here. If you want more strategies like this, make sure that you subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. If this gave you a new way to think about reading, drop a comment below. I would love to know how it changed your thinking about reading. And if your child is struggling and choosing not to read because it just feels too hard, I want you to know that is something that we can figure out. I offer a free assessment where we can pinpoint exactly what skills are holding your child back and map out a plan to help them start reading independently. Because when reading starts to feel easier, everything changes. I'm going to put a link below for you.